You're listening to Permission to Shine, the podcast. Stories of overcoming obstacles and finding self-empowerment with Sherisse Bisram, Inner Power Activation Leader. The Oxford Dictionary describes permission as the action of officially allowing someone to do a particular thing, consent, authorization. What if you were that someone and you gave yourself the permission to be everything you wanted to be and more? No more playing small and accepting less than. You are worthy of the life of your dreams, regardless of what it is that you've been through. And honestly, it's exactly what you've been through that has shaped you into the version of yourself that you are now. Like a diamond, you've endured so much, but instead of breaking, you have become stronger and brighter. And if that's not a reason to shine, then I don't know what is. And if nature can do it, then why the hell can't you? You are brave, you are strong, you are powerful, and you are enough. Hear my call and give yourself the permission to shine, because you don't realise how many people are inspired by your light. Hi everyone, this is episode 41 and I'm so excited to introduce Megan to you today because funny enough, I've actually followed Megan for quite a while because a friend of mine was being mentored by her and I've just watched her stuff for a long time, and the other day I listened to her podcast. I'm part of actually one of her programs as well that she'll speak to you about later. But yeah, I just really was engaged by her story and all of her messaging and everything like that. I'm always a big fan of. So I just felt like I've got to have her on to talk about her life and everything else in between. So hello, Megan. Thank you for being here.
Oh, hello. Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to be here and to share everything.
Yeah, lovely. Do you want to just, for anyone that doesn't know you, kind of give a description of like what your actual title is of your work and all of the things?
Yeah, I always struggle with this. I guess at the core of it, I'm a mindset and subconscious identity coach and mentor, but I cover subconscious messaging, sales, but it's always about getting to the nitty-gritty and really finding I call it the USP, your unique selling point, your unique perspective, your magic to bring forth into the world and how you're supposed to transform other people's lives.
Yes, that part, absolutely that. And do you know what? That the key part that you said there was something that really resonates with me with you always is about, like how we can transform people's lives. I think that whenever I've said that to people, especially like normal folk that don't do this kind of work, they're all like, that's a bold statement. I'm like, that's just who I am, bruh. Like that's just how I roll. That's my goal. And they're like, wow, okay, are you a bit crazy? I'm like, yeah, I am. I'll take it.
You have to be a bit crazy, I think, to come into this work, and you bear so much online, don't you? And I think
Mm,
that's the beauty of it. I actually think people have a lot of stories sometimes around the coaching industry or social media, and you know me, always come back to a story you tell yourself. But ultimately, like, we as women, I think, have never had this opportunity. Like, obviously
mm.
I'm a mum to an almost 2-year old. And I think at any point in your life, whether you're a mum or not, as women, we've never had this opportunity to work how we want to work, not like the 9 to 5 desk job, which was created by men for men, but to work in a way that actually plays in our feminine energy, like the creativity, our intuition, our connection with sharing the story, and actually make money from it. And I think that is such a powerful tool that we've never had. We're the first generation to be able to create this for future generations, and I think that's pretty special. So we have to be a bit delulu when we're breaking societal norms, which is what I say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love all of that. And that's definitely my vibe. Funny enough, the meeting I had before this, I was literally speaking about that. It was like, how can we, so I think it's the International Women's Day on the 8th. So I work for a women's charity as well, like as a freelancer. I'm doing bits and bobs and like leadership development and things like that. And we were talking about how can we make this impact, how can we share this stuff even more so, and exactly that came up in conversation. We need to be telling more stories of the people that we've helped and supported, but not only that, people in the world that we don't always see. There's so much going on outside of Western world right now. How can we amplify their voices through using our own? And I think, like you said, all of that's so important that we don't realize, everything. My thing is obviously in our power and all of our power, and I think we don't realize how much access we have to this to be able to, not only help ourselves but other people. So I think, like, you're so right, we are in this new age and we need to utilize this space, because otherwise
what are we doing, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And it's that, like you said there, the stories of others as well. That's how, you know, things have been passed down since we existed, since like for billions of years, is through story. And that's what, you know, that's a powerful tool with social media, is actually the main. Oh my God, we're going to go here, aren't we? But we're taking that control back, aren't we, by being able to share what we want to share and how we want to do it. We don't have to play by some rules according to Instagram, but we really do get to be that voice for ourselves and for those who can't yet have the voice. And that's always been something that I'm quite passionate about as well. I was very shy when I was younger, and so as I got more confident as I was older, I'd always be that person who would like say something to the pervy man on the train. Like, so I was like, well, he starts being like that to a younger girl who's too afraid to say something, like I'll be the one to say something from now.
Absolutely. I was exactly the same as that. I mean, I was never shy as a child, by the way, but I was always that person that was like, I'm not going to take that from you. And then I ended up developing quite toxic masculine energy from that. But equally, I think it was a good thing in some spaces for sure.
Yeah, I've done the exact same journey.
Well, let's hear about your journey. So, if you want to just, I mean, whatever you're happy to share that's kind of shaped you into where you are now, yeah, it'd be great to just hear your story. And then, obviously, at any point I want to add more in, I'll tap in. But yeah, please take the floor.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'll start with, so it's crazy. 4 years ago, just over 4 years ago is when I say I started my business. I moved to Thailand 5 days after my wedding, and I was like, I'm going to create an online business. And at the time, I was just really into health and fitness and wellness, and I literally had no idea how big the coaching industry was. And that year in Thailand, obviously we all know what happened in 2020, but that year in Thailand was just this deep dive into my soul, into the subconscious, into limiting beliefs, into like all of the things. I just absorbed all of this information, didn't make much money at all. But I was just like, oh my gosh, this world exists. And it was like something that it was just like, I never realized it was there. And it was like the thing I always didn't know I needed. And then I came back to the UK in September 2020, didn't want to come back, came back because of the whole situation. Obviously, we were kind of stuck out there for the year, which wasn't the worst place to be stuck, to be honest. And I went back into a job. And when I came back to the UK, I was just so in victim. Like, it didn't matter what I'd learned. I was so angry about being back in my old flat. I was angry about being back in the UK. Obviously, like there were lockdowns. I had to go back to a job. Like all of this language, even like I felt like I had to go back to a job. And I just got into like a really toxic space. And then in 2020, obviously we were in lockdown, so like July 2021, and in June 2021, I found out I was pregnant with my first child. And this was really like I always talk to my clients about this. I call it like the metaphorical crossroads. So this was the moment. And in the first, if any of you have been pregnant, you know, like those first few months are horrific. Like any negativity is amplified, or your hormones are all over the place. And I just realized like I'd done all of this work, I'd spent all of this time on myself, I'd spent all of this investment and money and energy on myself. And I was like, I'm actually not proud of who I am. Like, I don't like who I am at the moment. And I was like, I'm pregnant. I can't bring a child into this world. And that was really I just remember thinking, like, I'm either gonna just give up and I'm gonna accept that my life is gonna be how I thought it always would be. I'm gonna go back to my job after maternity leave. I'm gonna put my child in daycare 5 days a week because I was traveling into London. And I just need to accept that this hasn't worked. And there was a small part of me, it's like, no, or we change who we are. Like, stop going in with all of the different business investments, all of the different content courses and all of the strategies and the secret strategy, and you just have to change. And I enrolled in a program which I talked to everyone about. It's Jim Fortin, who's Manifestation Babes coach, if you're aware of her, has a transformational coaching program. And it was just 13 weeks of a deep dive into my own self. And it changed my life. During this time, so it was the end of 2021, it was like the middle of my pregnancy, my relationship, my marriage started to break down, which I didn't share online at the time, but there was just a lot happening. And then New Year's Eve on 2021, we kind of, everything came to a head, and it was like, yeah, not sure that he wants to be with me. And I was like, my whole world is collapsing. Like, I literally, it wasn't even the rug pulled from underneath me. It was like my whole world collapsed. And I was like, I'm about to have this baby. Like, we'd been together 10 years. This was not a quick marriage or anything like that. And I was like, I have no idea how my life is going to look in 3 months. Like, my baby was due in March. I was like, I have no idea. I don't know where I'm going to live. I don't know how I'm going to afford things. I was like putting everything in a spreadsheet. And in January 2022, I was 7 months pregnant, and I had like a £2,000 month, which was my highest month I'd ever had. I signed quite a few clients, and it was like all the work I'd been doing over the previous few months like came together. And it was like this little sign of like, you can do this. And then I obviously like had my baby and everything. Took a bit of time off to deal with that. That identity crisis that happens when you have a child. And then I came back kind of was online all the time, and then I started selling again in May, and I had like a 3k month. And then in August I had like a 6.5k, and it's not even about the money. Like, I talk about these as milestones because they were milestones I was chasing for so long. Was I just want to make enough money that I was getting in my full-time job. I just want to make the 5k month, like. But it was all of this, but it was the fact that I thought, this is never going to happen for me. Like, how am I ever going to make this work when I've got a baby to look after? Like, I couldn't make it work when I had just had myself to look after. How am I going to make it work with a baby? And that was the real thing. I remember in August 2022 when I had that 6.5k cash month, and it wasn't the money. It was the fact my husband was working 6 days a week, so we were still together at this point. He was working 6 days a week. I had about a day and a half of help from my mother-in-law, and I was just so proud of myself. And I remember driving, you probably heard me tell this story, I was driving to the cafe where I would do my work, like trying to feed before, breastfeed when I got back, like making sure my boobs weren't too swollen, and the music was playing, and the window was down, and the sun was shining, and I just thought, I'm so proud of myself. And it was because I had defied the odds that I had set for me. And then in October 22, so a few months later, we separated, and I moved into a house by myself. And then I had like all these other like 5 cash months, like launches and things like that. And it was just all of these things that I just never thought would happen started to happen. And I think it's really interesting that we speak now at this time as well, because I feel like there's a lot of, I talk about that time a lot as like, oh, I'm so proud of myself and I did so well. But actually, the last few months have been a lot of like, there was avoidance there. There was almost a trauma response of everything that was going on. And the business was something I could control. And then last year in 2023 was when all of this kind of started manifesting physically, and probably 2023 was harder than 2022 despite becoming a mum. So I've really, I think for me, I always come back to that work that I did at the end of 2021, which is, who am I being? Like, what are my values? Like, what is the identity, the beliefs, the fears? And that's always the work I come back to. So that's always the work I tend to do with my clients. But yeah, it's interesting now. I feel like Hudson is 2 in March. I'm working on things with my husband again. We both had therapy. And it's like this new era that I'm moving into, but it's the healing era that I'm in now as well. And so like maybe we can touch on that. It's like, how do you heal and run a business? Because that's been a really new journey for me as well. And I think I'm somebody I feel like my journey, my experiences, my life is like what I'm here to teach others as well. That's really how I see things. So that's kind of like leads me to now. A lot happened last year. We can dive into things, but yeah, a lot of health challenges, a lot of like identity shedding. I think it was a real, almost like, I'm ashamed to say it, but there was a lot of unconscious belief patterns, or we hear in the UK media, especially single parents, single mothers, And that was something that I had to work a lot through. So that really affected me. There was just so much happened last year where it was like all of the things that I'd avoided for so long started, and I still kept avoiding them like until recently, to be honest. But I think I'm at that place now where it's like, and even this morning, that's why I say it's interesting we speak today, and I don't believe in coincidences. I was like, actually, who are we behind everything else? And that's why it's really interesting for me to share that story of like, oh, the high cash months and stuff like that. But actually, it got to a point where I was like, who am I behind all of this? And that's really what my journey has been on the last year, probably, and still on. And I think we see that. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, because we talk a lot about inner powers. Is I think there's a lot of women who their identities are so wrapped up in what they think they can achieve, or their motherhood, or or their partner, and one of those things might go away, and they're like, who am I behind that? And it is the most ego death experience. I don't know if you've ever had an experience like that. I've had it in almost every area of my life over the last couple of years. But that's really where I feel like my work is deepening into, is it's like, who's the person behind all of the success, or the identities, or the attachments that you have to the outside world?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing all of that, because I think it's so wonderful. And I have heard you say it a few times. Obviously, I've been in your energy for quite a while now, but it's great to just hear it again, because I think, especially, there's so much to that, so many layers to it. And I think the first part, obviously, running the business. And, for anyone that is running a business or in that space, there is always this kind of this connection, isn't there, to like, should I be doing this? Am I doing the right thing? And I think it's almost like how you I always say, I mean, you could completely disagree, but I feel like there's always an element of like the first couple of months to a year is always sowing the seeds of like what it is you want to be, and who are you in this space, and almost like, just letting people know who you are and what it is you do. And then obviously that conviction and belief in yourself is what leads it to flourish, I think, at some point. But I think what you mentioned there was really similar to kind of, things in my life pattern. So similar to you, when the pandemic happened, like my plan was always to be a professional dancer, and like I was always being a professional dancer, by the way, up to this point, and I was going to move to LA. So that was always my thing. And I had my meeting with the attorneys booked in LA to go out there, do all the things, and then I couldn't do it. And I was like, oh my gosh, like what do I do now? So again, the same identity crisis. Who am I without being the professional dancer? So I kind of then embarked on my own healing journey, and not realizing up to that point that I'd experienced childhood trauma. So lots of these things were unraveling at this time, health issues, things like that, that I'd always kind of had, stomach issues, not realizing it was related to childhood trauma experiences. So those that real pandemic year was everything unraveling, unlearning, and yeah, deep dive healing work. And because of my toxic masculine energy, which I was mentioned previously, is that I was doing it all on my own. So I was probably similar to you, like kind of investing in courses and looking at how to do these things and unpacking it. And then towards the end of that year, I thought, well, I'm going to just do my master's, because there's nothing else to do. I could do it from home. And then that deepened the childhood trauma healing, because I didn't realize how much of a part it played in my life and all of these things. So I guess, yeah, what I'm saying is like finding out who really I am on the inside, and not being this version of myself in this the pure ego form. So that was really my ego's death, to be like, gosh, who actually am I? And then the last few years I've really spent like redefining my boundaries, my friendship groups, and the work I wanted to do, and even like my identity within my business, but equally knowing that I am this thing more so. And I think that's where even creating the name of what I call myself in my business, that was all there, because it's fluffy, isn't it? The industry, it can be like, I was originally going for like self-love and empowerment, and the mentor that I work with was like, that's not you, mate. I'm sorry, that is not you. And I was like, oh, is it not? And then I had to go through all this. And now when I walk into a room and I'm with other people that do the self-love thing, which I'm not shunning away, absolutely not, I can see why my title is Inner Power Activation Leader, because that's always been there. So I think it's like almost how we use our trauma, which I think in your case it's the same, you know, using that trauma as like a rocket launch fuel to put into your business and that drive to like keep you going. But then equally you need to be able to find that balance within being human and being in your business. And I guess for me that kind of sounded like that's what you were saying to some extent, is that because you were avoiding the other things and you could tunnel your energy into the business, that almost like you as a human was actually suffering internally but not wanting to identify with it, which is absolutely understandable. And I think, you know, I've not been a parent myself yet. It is something I want to do, but you know, I've witnessed it so heavily, and especially co-parenting with my sister for her first child. There's so many shifts that happen in our bodies, and as women we kind of get gaslighted by society about that, but that in itself is like everything you once were you no longer are, because you've gone out of that maiden energy to the crone, and it's like there's like massive shifts, isn't there, in internally, physically, spiritually. So I think yeah, it's really wonderful to hear your journey and how everything's interconnected, because like you said, the success of the cash month is great, and it's a point to prove to you that I am worthy, I am deserving, I can do this. And that's the greatest success, I think, for you, for sure, like even hearing it. But it's like, yeah, how can you do and be all of that still with, you know, being human and raising a toddler and, you know, all of that. So I'm always drawn to coaches that have kids, because I think if you can do all of this with children, I'm like, yo, that's a big deal, you know. So I think it's incredible that you what you've achieved so far as well, but I think it's even more incredible that you're now stepping into yourself again fully and being like, okay, right, I need to heal this again. And that's the thing about healing, isn't it? It's not linear, it's circular. We're always going to keep going through it. So I think it's really lovely to hear that. But I guess in all of that, and I know that first high cash month was a real turning, like big thing for you. But what would you say like your moment was in that journey where you did give yourself that permission to shine? Like where was it like, I'm doing this?
I remember actually, so I had my son in March. He was like 10 days late. So there was the dealing with all of that. Um, and I remember, so for like March, April, I was just like, I felt like this, oh my God, like something happened for me, and I've witnessed it with other women. I've spoken about other women. Like when I had my son, and I think it happens quite often, is you're like, oh my God, the female body is incredible. Like I just had such this newfound respect for like women, and women who were just like to literally rip your body apart to birth life into the world, and then you keep this incapable human alive. It's just such an incredible experience, and I think that in itself was like a wow, you know, the human, I was just had respect for women. And I think regardless of ever actually if you give birth in terms of an actual child, but like it was like it's just the complete essence of feminine energy is the creation point, right? Whether you create an idea or a human or whatever, like we just have that massive potential within us. So that was like a big thing. And I obviously came back and had like this successful launch. I'd never launched anything and had more than one person in it. And like people were just like, it was like all of the things that you want. And then I got a bit, I hired my one-to-one coach back, and I like committed to this year, and I was like, oh my God, I only have enough money to pay like what am I doing? I only have enough money to pay like the next couple of months, because I was only getting maternity pay for a couple of months. I didn't go back to my job in the end. And then I also had a wedding coming up, which is my sister-in-law's wedding. And obviously there's all like this stuff going on internally, and I was traveling to Italy with my 4-month-old son, and I was just really stressed about the whole thing. And I really got in my head. And when I got back from that holiday, I felt, because it had been such a thing, I think this is the thing with anything that's going on, it takes up so much brain power. And when you're a business owner, obviously that's then stealing from your energy to create. So I got back end of July. The wedding was in July, and I got back, and obviously August was when I hit this like 6.5 month. And I was like, do you know what? I'm just gonna meet myself where I'm at. Like I'm gonna stop trying to pretend I'm anywhere else than I have to be. I'm just gonna stop trying to like be somebody I'm not, and just like, I'm here, it was just this real, I say it all the time, it's this real meet myself where I'm at the moment, where I don't need to be anyone else, I don't need to be anything else, I have enough right now. And I remember I was like quite stressed out, and my husband was like, go and get a coffee, just go, I'll look after the baby for a bit, because I was exclusively breastfeeding, so I was basically like limited to how much I could stand away from him. He didn't take a bottle. And it was a really sunny day, and I was just feeling a bit depressed, to be honest, which I think is totally normal. And I went out and I got an iced coffee, and I sat with my journal in the sun in the coffee shop outside. And I was just like, where am I going to be at the end of the month? And like, it was like, how did I handle it when things didn't go my way? Which is one of the questions I always get people to ask themselves. And that was it. And then August, I had this 6.5K cash month, and I had no idea where it was going to come from. I had like about 1,000, not even 1,000. I think I had like £650 booked in terms of like that was coming in, and it was like all of these different ways. But it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't the money. It was just me making that decision of like, I'm already enough, regardless of everything else going on. And I still use those journal prompts now.
Yeah, I love that. And that's really this is what I think, what we do as humans, don't we? We really overcomplicate everything, and it does get to be that simple. And I think I myself have had this same journey, you know, like from my healing journey, I created a journal that I now sell as a product, because I was like, this did my thing. And then even last year, I think investing into my mentor, that was the most money I'd ever paid for anything before, all of my savings. I wasn't energetically prepared for that exchange. So I think that I then fell into like a lack gap. And yeah, I mean, even now it's like kind of, you know, like anytime anything goes wrong, instead of like being a victim of that circumstance, and like, I never regretted that money, by the way, investing that, never at all. And I believe that that money comes back in other ways, which we can't see, and or it will come back in intangible form as well. But I think I had to really befriend that notion of exactly what you said then, like, what did you do when it went wrong? Or what did you do when you didn't have as much money, or you didn't make that? Like, what happens? And actually, nothing is on me. It's not who I am as a person. It's like circumstantial or situation based. And I think, like you said, it really is that when you take yourself out of the label of whatever you put on yourself, and even how much money you earn, I think that in itself then makes you a magnet for the things that you want in some form of a way, doesn't it? You know, and I think we don't realize how much we perpetuate the negative things almost to an extent. When we are in that space of feeling lack, it just draws more of that to us, until we like look it in the eye, right, with the prompts and stuff, like those deep questions. Like, I will hold a banner up outside my front door naked if I have to, that says "Do the work, journal." Like, do you know what I mean? Like, that is like, I will take that to my grave. You have to do this work. There's nothing else that's going to help you get there, because, you know, everyone can tell you it, can't they? But whether you do it or not, that's completely on you.
Yeah, I've had the same experience with, I made some really bold investments in that first year of having Hudson, where I was really proud of myself that, you know, I actually paid them out of my business account. I didn't end up putting things on credit cards, which I'd done in the past, and I was really proud of myself. And there was one investment I made where I was like, I'm nuts for doing this. And that was when I did, you know, both intangibly and tangibly make that back. But I've done the same, where afterwards I think there's I'd like to talk about this actually. I'm glad you brought it up, because I think there's a lot of talk in the personal development world of like, you pay the money and you calibrate to that, or like it will come back to you. And I believe that all the time, and I do believe it. But I think for a lot of people, and this was definitely the mindset I was in, and it's like, I think a lot of the time unconsciously people do it, and I'm not saying you did this, but I know I did this, with like a need to be saved. I think it comes from, and I had, like you say, toxic masculinity, which I had wounded feminine, really, like I had wounded feminine, like, which I still probably am working on, because of all of the independence that I've had to have over the last couple of years. And I think sometimes there's real power in there's a lot of talk online. Don't ask for the link and don't buy. No, I can ask for more information and I can decide that's a no. But for a long time, I actually said yes to programs because I didn't want to be the person who'd ask for more information and then said no, because I thought that meant something negative. And I did do that actually in 2021 for another mastermind before the big one I went into. And it was not what I wanted. It was not the right thing for me. It wasn't her, wasn't she was a great coach and everything, but it was just not the right experience for me. And so that's something that I've had to, I mean, I've been working with one mentor now in various different places since about May. And it's really about, I think there's something to be said in having constraint and trusting yourself, which is what your listeners, it's like that inner power of like, sometimes it feels so good to be expanded by other people and to be in a community of people, or to work one-on-one with someone and to upskill yourself. But I think there are also seasons in your life where you actually need to harness that inner power and trust. And like at the moment, I don't have, for the first time, like a coach where I can boxer in a long while. And like I can feel myself like I want to bounce ideas off. And although it's great to have that, for me right now, I'm like, I actually need to practice restraint of trusting myself in this, new. For me, I've spoken to my current mentor, who I'm working with on in her membership at the moment, and she's a mum. And I've heard this a lot as well, like 2-year-old is like, there's a difference, like we're not meant to bounce back, like some women breastfeed up to like 2. I breastfed for like a year and he was very dependent, he still very is clingy, but there's something, this is the first time since I've had him where I'm starting to have like fitness goals for myself, and I feel like I can, he's sleeping through the night most nights. Like things like this that I just haven't had before. So there's definitely, I'm in a new season of life right now. But I think that's important that you mentioned there about the investment, because sometimes it doesn't come back straight away and it's not a magic thing. And like there's might be more, it's not about your fault, but it might be more like a different journey that you're on that is different to people that you see online, and that's completely perfect and okay.
Absolutely, I completely agree with you. And it did take me, like, 'cause I signed with her for 6 months, and it took me the rest of the year to really sit into that notion as well, because I feel like for me, I've always kind of had this, whether it be toxic or actually grounded, which I feel like I am very much in now, of knowing that it will always work out,
Yeah.
So I think that when you're in that space and you give over that exchange, and actually I came from a place of, when I invested in the fact that I didn't know these things, so it makes sense to invest in someone that does, so then I can then know it. And that was like the first real part of me opening up to the feminine of receiving. And I think that was really my exchange in that experience, was the feminine impact it made in my life. Because although I was following her strategy and the way she did things the first half of the year, which did work, like, I mean, I didn't make any crazy high cash months, but I was making income from it. And I was, this is the first time I've done anything like this, had to change my whole audience view of me for them to see me actually as I am as a human and not as a performer. So that was all really what we did. But even more so, I think it was, like I said, the feminine connection, which I didn't have in that capacity. And actually, when I think about it on a deeper level, all of the things that I came from my journey of healing in that lockdown period, even working with the women's charity, all of those things are like positive female connections, because I know for sure that I was a mirror to the fact that I was so in the toxic masculine that I was only finding, wounded feminine spaces or people that were codependent on me or whatever, because that's how I felt empowered, by being that protection provider like a man would be. And obviously I don't mean that in a binary term, more so about the energy, but yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? And I think when we understand like mindset and identity, I think that is like a greater power than that anyone's ever known, isn't it? I'm like, how this is like literally when you step out of this 3D world that you're living in, like following, like we said, the 9 to 5, the patterns, all of the things, like you don't realize that actually you can just change that whole narrative for yourself. And this is what I mean about, we can make it simpler, but we don't know how, I guess.
Yeah, we tell ourselves stories. We like to it has to be we're taught a certain narrative a lot of the time at school or by our parents and or caregivers, and this is the thing I always come back to. I've had plenty of rock bottoms over the last 2 years, and every time I have a version, and everyone's version of rock bottom is totally different, of course, but every time I have those fall to my knees moments, I don't think, what is the strategy? What's the messaging? How do I market this? I just like, I literally pass it to God. Like I've prayed more and I use God in a spiritual term, not a religious
Yeah.
term. I have prayed more in the last 6 months or more. And I went to a Catholic school when I was very young. Like my first primary school was Catholic. So I've done that. I had to untangle all of that stuff as well, because that was that was like very sinful type thing for me. But yeah, I've prayed more in the last few months than I have probably my whole life before that. And there's been a lot of so you mentioned, the attachment to the life that you thought you would have, when you thought you would be a professional dancer. And that was the same thing I went through. Was I thought I was going to have this life of like how my life was going to look, with especially bringing a baby into the world. And I think disentangling from a future that you think you were supposed to have and not realizing how attached you were to it is one of the most painful processes that you can go through. But in those moments, you turn to the higher power. You turn to my being, you turn to the subconscious mind, because that's going to be the thing that gets you out of it, not doing something. Then of course there's behaviors and actions and habits that come out of it, but ultimately it's about being a different person if you want to change your life.
Absolutely that. And it's the surrender, isn't it? Like it's, and I think you mentioned this previously, and it's something that I've been, a massive person. It's a habit of mine that I now am trying to get into the right space, but control has played such a massive part of my life. But I think, when you come from maybe, my background is trauma, but equally, whatever the background is for you, like whether it be to perfectionism or proving yourself, like when you can let go of that control and trust that, like you said, something above you is guiding you here. I believe that our souls have a contract that have already been planned out for us. So I think that whether we know it or not, I think that we're never in control. But equally, I do feel like we have a say. And like you said, you could just choose a different thing. And that was really my mindset. Even the beginning of this year, I had all of my bills come out on the 2nd of January. I was like, wow, was not expecting that. And I was like, okay, cool. I see it. It's happening. I'm not going to be annoyed about it. I'm just going to do something a little bit differently. So what can I do to change the way I feel about it? And don't get me wrong, I had a little bit of a shadowy thing of like, but then equally I was like, you know what, from this day I'm going to start to get more working again. So actually I don't need to worry about this for right now. It's not a thing. But old me would have perpetuated a cycle and been like, why me, and all of this stuff. And I was like, no, that's not who I am anymore. And it is exactly that. You just get to change. You get to change those behavior patterns 100%.
Yeah. So we say get to change it, and it's way harder than I'm just going to learn a new strategy, which is why.
Yeah.
So, and I feel like I feel like people, this is my view, I think we have a lot of shared views. I feel like I'm seeing people going more onto the strategy, and I think there's a lot of fear in the world at the moment with, the 3D things that we're seeing, like the living costs and, all of the things that are going on in the world that are in all other areas of the world. There's a lot of fear. And I feel like when people go into fear, they go into what they can control.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it's easy for me to control like X, Y, Z. And yeah, control has been a huge, I think we're going to go after this. That's probably been one of the biggest lessons I'm learning, is to let go of control. I had a Reiki session with my old neighbor. My neighbor was like, he was like a spirit guide sent to me. And when I moved to the house that I lived in on my own, the first time I'd ever lived alone, apart from obviously I had Hudson, but as an adult, it was the first time I'd ever lived alone. And my neighbor was like a 50-odd-year-old man, and he had a dog, and we started talking one day, and in the summer we'd sit outside in the evening when Hudson was sleeping, we'd talk, and he was deeply spiritual, like old school spiritual, been doing it for like 25 years. And he gave me a Reiki session once, and he was like, oh my God, he was like, you little fighter, because my head, I can get so in my head, and a lot of my work for the last year has been about connecting back to my heart and connecting back to my body, and because I disconnected from it, trauma response of everything. I didn't want to feel the emotions, I didn't want to feel the grief and the pain and the loss and the heartbreak, so I disconnected, and it's been a pattern that's, you know, over my whole life. So that's been a huge pattern of mine, which I think we'll get into. But yeah, it was just interesting how you said that.
Yeah, it's really funny actually about you talking about the Reiki, because I had the same experience. So I just, one day after this big bulk of the healing through the pandemic, and we were kind of coming out the other side of lockdown, and I was just like, I feel like I need some sort of energy healing or something. And I wasn't as deeply spiritual as what I am now. I think before I'd always dabbled in it. I'd always been into astrology and like the universe and things like that, but never in like a more, I guess, our body connecting up to our chakras and all of those things. That's all been quite a new process, probably within the last 3 years. But I just Googled a woman, anyone. I was like, energy healing, Reiki healing. I didn't know what I needed. And I just found someone that I like the look of. I just called the number. And this is the thing about the universe. Like, it's never anything that it's never a coincidence. I rang her and I said, to be honest, I don't even know what I'm ringing you. I went, I've got no idea. I don't even know what I need. And she went, hold on a minute. And she just stopped for a moment, and then she was like, just keep talking to me. So I kept talking to her, and she went, you need your chakras cleared. She was like, you've got blocks in your body that are probably as a result of trauma. And I didn't even tell her about trauma at that point. And I was like, whoa, okay. And she was like, come and see me. She was like, we'll do an energy clearing and then we'll go from there. And like anyway, we kind of had that connection, and what we realized is we'd had a past life together at some form of a way. But I think they said that everyone in your life right now, you've had some form of a connection with in a past life, but exactly the same as you. Like my head energy was so like built up, and then my heart chakra was completely closed, and like, you know, there was lots of things that she had to open to reconnect me. She was like, because you dance, she was like, there's a physical thing where you like that string always stays aligned with you, but it's almost like until you're doing that in your everyday life, where you feel really truly centered. But after she did those like the blocks and healed, like cleared, or whatever it was that she was doing, my life just changed dramatically from that point. So I really do put a lot into those things, and also breath work. I feel like those are the big things that have really changed my life. So like you said, not just that, like, you know, even strategy had played no part really to it. I was just winging it and just what felt right. But I think yeah, those moments where we can energetically let go of everything we've been holding, because our body keeps a score, like you said, like it manifests itself. All that trauma was manifesting itself into these physical ailments that I had no idea about. And then that really broke me open to, like, I guess, who my true essence is. But it was just so armored up with all the trauma that it just couldn't have the space to breathe and be fully. So yeah, I fully resonate with everything you said on that, for sure.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And I love these coincidences of how people come into our lives. Like, and that's what I had with my old neighbor, is like, he was just, like I said, he was just like, he helped with Hudson, like he helped with the dog. He was just like I probably never had like a really, and you know, he wasn't like a manly man in the way that is portrayed to us, but he was just like almost like my protector when I was living. Like if things went wrong in the house, or if Rocco was having like a weird funny turn, I would go and check with him. And I think these people always come into our lives at the perfect time, and that's a miracle. You know, we always think a miracle has to be this like big grand wow thing, but actually, like that experience you had with the energy healer was like, that's a miracle. And it's like, how amazing is that you could just experience that whenever, if you just open up your mind to it and your heart to it. Like, these things are always available to you. That's been a big journey or lesson, I think, in the last, I would say, since like May I started doing this work, or May, June. And you know, I used to think a miracle would be like a client coming out of the blue. But it would be like I'd open the back door and there would just be the most like breathtaking sunset, and that would actually be my miracle. And it was just like, that's actually what we're looking for. It's just like that feeling inside of ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely that. And again, I guess it's that inner power thing, isn't it? Again, like we don't realize the capacity of what we can hold and be and achieve and have. And I think that goes beyond, like we're saying, like physical form, even, like even down to conversations that you have with people, like in the street, and you just remember it. Like that one person said that one thing, you're like, wow. I think this is where yeah, that whole thing connects, because I think you don't realize that my first thing is when I teach people about, you know, confidence, for example, like, how are you seeing the world? And it's like, if you can give someone else a compliment, then that helps you to see more of a compliment in yourself. Like it's these little things that go hand in hand with, obviously, you look in the mirror, seeing it in yourself, and it's like a backlog thing that you just reprogramming the subconscious to see like good in things rather than the bad, like you would have done before. Because a lot of the clients that come to me for this type of thing have this judgmental view of everything, and it's because we've been burnt, our trauma, whatever it is, that's kind of given us this world view on things. So I think that and a key part of all of this, I think, is the receiving of it. Because like you said, that those little miracles that you see and you find in everything, if you're closed off and tunnel vision on just the thing you think you should be doing, you're going to miss everything else around you. And I always say, it's like, I feel like with my performing career, I was like driving 100 miles an hour down this motorway, not realizing I was driving through paradise. And I think when yeah, the car stopped working, for example, I had to get out, and I was like, oh wow, actually the world around me is actually really beautiful, and I've just ignored it for the last 10 years. So I think
Mm.
all of that is all part and parcel, isn't it, really? But let's go into now more like kind of where you're at now, because obviously we're kind of transitioning for sure. But I guess, like, what lessons would you say that you feel like you experienced prior that are kind of coming up again now, and like how are you working through that?
Um, I think the my two patterns I think are avoidance and control. Like they're the things that I'm like, they're coming up in different areas. It's funny, every time I let go of, there's like, basically since I moved back from Thailand, I wanted to move back to Thailand. um and that was all I wanted, and it was all I would fixate on. It was all my manifestations, it was all my visualizations, was Thailand. And I let go of that the last few months. I was like, accepted that's not how my life is supposed to look. I'm missing out on what it could be. And it crops back up again every time I let it go of a potential thing. But it's, I think for me, like it's deeper. Yeah, I think the control avoidance, and now is like a new version of like victimhood comes up for me. I think it comes up for everyone. I really got out of that, but then it can be really sneaky how it comes back in. I think especially as I transition into this new season of motherhood, new season of business, and things changing in a personal life. It's like, how do I get to rewrite the stories I'm telling myself now? What beliefs am I are coming up that have come up before? What am I saying I can't, why I can't have this? So yeah, it's so interesting, because I think I'm just at such a, it's not a crossroads again, but it is like a different viewpoint. That's how I feel I'm at a different viewpoint now.
Mm.
So that I think these patterns of avoidance and control I've been playing out for the last year, and I think I'm at that place now. It's like you can't ignore it anymore. So
Mm.
there's things I'm doing where I'm like, I'm facing it. I'm having the difficult conversations. I'm doing the things that I've been putting off for like forever. Um, and we'll see if I break the cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes as well, we put so much pressure on ourselves to come out of it. And I think it's almost like every time you're doing something, you're just easing the tension, aren't you? So eventually it'll just buckle. And like one day it could be such a simple thing that you're like, oh my gosh, I would have reacted to that before and I haven't. And I think that's like the being kind to ourselves on it, isn't it? Because some people live their whole lives in these same patterns, creating the same issues, never doing anything about it, and live a miserable life. So I think that, it is, and I think being a mum and going on this journey as well as running your business is so hard, and I think that needs to be spoken about more, because I think in the industry as well, there is that toxic positivity thing. And I think that's what I love about your content as well. It's very real. And I think that's really what's going to happen as well, astrologically as well, with the Aquarius shift, is that now the real is going to like shine through, and all of that toxic positivity and like influences that just were, I don't know, doing rubbish things, are going to all fall off the platform and not be supported. Because actually, generally, I think the way the world's working right now is that independence and like breaking the rules or the social norms is all coming forward. So I think that we're going to have a lot more real meaningful conversations on social media than we've ever had. And I think yeah, that's what's, obviously you've been doing this for a long time, so I think that that's great, that this is all here and now, because it is human. I think we forget that, don't we? Like, even in the business world, but in life, you know, when you see people around the corner, everyone's like, how are you? You're like, yeah, good, yeah. And actually, you're like, I barely made it out the door this morning, to be honest. Like, you know, and I remember being in those spaces myself, and I had a really difficult time again, probably October 2022 to probably, I'd say, April last year, of just again rehealing and feeling low in myself. And then one day it just lifted, and I was like, I'm so glad I stayed consistent in that, just working through whatever it was. But I just think that's life, isn't it? And every cycle will bring new wounds. And I think it's just, well, I say new wounds, it's like that old wound resurface. So I think it's like about being really honest about that and being like, yeah, do you know what? This is just humanness. And I think the fact that we can take it into our own hands and be accountable for it takes a lot of victimhood away. But equally, sometimes it is just shit, and that's okay, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, like, you know, life will unfold. That's been a big part of my surrender, is it's like life will unfold the way it's been unfolding. If you've read The Surrender Experiment, that was a big thing for me last summer. And you can't control all, like, I think of everything that's happened over the last couple of years, and it's like, I never thought that would happen. I was not innocent in the situation at all either. Like, the marriage breakdown was definitely a contribution of multiple things that I wasn't aware of, that was basically was just off of avoidance, of avoiding talking about the things that we really wanted to talk about, and independence and all of that stuff, toxic independence, hyper independence. But I would never have imagined it would happen. And so, like, I can't, like, I used to spend so long thinking, like, what if I'd have done something different? What could I have done different? Like, I should have done this. And even like the last year, I've been in that energy a lot. I should have done more. I should have done this. I should have. And it's like, actually, like, everything, there is a greater plan than what we can see in our 3D reality. Like, you just can't see everything. Like, if you were picked up and dropped off in like a completely, like, I don't know, middle of Australia, like, you're gonna see a different version of reality. And it's like, can you accept, like, okay, how do I want to see this? That's the only thing you can control, is your interpretation of the events happening. And when everything happened with the relationship breakdown, like, this story I had was like, this, there has to be a bigger reason for this. Like, I don't accept that this is the end of my life and like this is it. There has to be a bigger reason that I can't see now, but I will have faith in that bigger reason whenever it chooses to reveal itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that takes a really I don't know what the right word would be to that, but like spiritually attuned person, I think, to get there. And I don't get me wrong, I think everyone can get to that space, but there's such a disciplined space to be in, isn't it? To be in that constant choice of surrender, because I think our default setting isn't to be in that space. So it's like you have to choose it every day. And I think that that's where a lot of things come into place. Like, I think we have to choose love every time, or we have to choose, you know, to make it work, we have to choose to invest our energy and time into something. I think that that's always the thing that I think we forget, is that we always have a choice of where our energy goes. And I think even down to like managing the day, right? Well, you know, like how many tasks you have, it's like you're choosing to put it into that thing. But if you're doing a meeting, but then also on your laptop doing something else at the same time. It's like your energy isn't fully invested. So I think wherever we put our time and energy is where we get the most um exchange. But again, with the healing thing, you don't know when it's going to come back for you, like the surrender part. You just have to again trust the process, which is the hardest thing in the world to do, isn't it? Like absolutely, hands
Yeah.
down.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's incredible everything you've been doing. And I guess, I mean, it'd be really great for you to kind of tell people what you're doing right now and like how they can work with you if they'd like to. Yeah, and all of the things.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think my work is the basis of my work is kind of all the things we've mentioned. That's the best place to start to get a taste of that is the Evolution membership, which is all about the identity transformation, the woman behind the business. If you have a business, it's mainly business owners, but we don't talk about strategy. We don't talk about, messaging or clients. Sometimes people ask me a question around that and it always comes back to the identity piece, but it's really the kind of like home for the mindset, the home for the identity, the subconscious work, which is just, if you find me on Instagram, that is the link in my bio. But I think that's where I'm really pouring all of my love and attention into it. It's having a little remakeover, you'll be pleased to know. So yeah, that's probably the best place to start. And yeah, my Instagram is at I am Megan Rose. But I think for me it's like turning pain to power, like finding your like I love hearing people's story, like even talking to you. I love the stories that people have and how we've been able to take the pain and turn that into power. And I think that's just the most incredible thing. It's like taking shit and turning it to gold. Like that's essentially what we're doing. Um, and there are so many people who do just get stuck in the pain and allow that to dictate their life, and that becomes their life. It becomes what they know and what they do. And actually, I believe that you have been given, like you said, the spiritual soul's contract. I believe the same, that we get given, we kind of choose our obstacle course of life before we come down, and then we forget it all when we get here, and it's like we choose like the medium, hard, very hard, difficult. And it's just there's various obstacles that you go to. Life will always life, but how can we lead ourselves through those moments?
Absolutely. It's so funny you said about the pain to power thing, because that's actually what I use in a lot of my like presentations and stuff. I always say my life is one of pain to power. So yeah, it's really funny, isn't it? All of those synchronicities. But it's been so lovely to speak with you and just have your story again in like real time, which has been so nice. And what I'll do is I'll get you to obviously send me all of your details and I'll pop them in the show notes. So if anyone wants to come and find you, that absolutely can. I do recommend everyone to follow you though, because I think some of the truth bombs that you drop, you're just like, wow, yeah, it really be like that. And even just the realness of like your life unfolding in real time and all of these things, which I think we need more ambassadors for this type of work. And I think I'm definitely trying to, well, I feel like generally I do share myself more so, but I feel like yeah, we need more of that just in the world, just in general, for sure. So thank you for just always sharing your truth. And yeah, I guess what would you like to be your like leaving message, your little soul to soul message?
um I feel like I said it in that last sentence because that really came through me. But yeah, I'm gonna elaborate on that, of like, I think that the pain to power thing of like there will be a story in your life that is a validating story of why you can't be or have something that you want, and it will be the story that your family and loved ones and whoever they'll support you. They'll be like, of course it's hard for you to do that, of course it's okay, it's okay. And that's the hardest thing, to be like, I know this is coming from love and I know that it's okay if I stop or don't do it, but actually I get to turn this story into the reason why. Like my breakdown
Mm.
becomes my breakthrough. It doesn't have to stop you. It doesn't have to mean that you can't have what you really, really want. It might just be that you get to be really creative about how you go about it. It doesn't have to look like other people's. Thank
Amen.
So hopefully that was really landed for
Yes.
some.
And a lot of the words you use there, I also use. So I was like, yes, there
Oh,
you go. That's the energy there for sure. But thank you so much for joining me, Megan. It was so lovely to have you. And as I said, anyone that needs to, I mean, everyone needs to follow Megan on the back of this, but equally, like any questions or anything, just send them over to Megan, go and find her. But thank you for joining me.
thank you for having me. It's been so nice.